Arizona Territory, 1887. The white-hot sun beat down on Hidden Mesa, a valley nestled between towering red rock formations that concealed it from the world beyond. Mason Jameson stood at the ridgeline, Winchester rifle in hand, watching for any sign of intruders approaching the secret valley his fellow cowboys had sworn to protect. At 25, Mason's youthful features belied the hardness in his blue eyes that had seen too much death on the frontier to believe in anything but survival. No place for softness out here, he muttered to himself, adjusting his worn leather hat. The valley below housed not just the Flying J ranch where he worked, but a miracle in the desert. A hidden spring that sustained lush grasslands and the small herd of prized cattle that Old Man Jenkins had cultivated. In a land plagued by drought and range wars, the valley was salvation itself, and a target for every desperate outfit within 100 miles, if they ever discovered it. Mason's handsome face was lightly stubbled after 3 days of patrol, his tall frame lean but powerful from years of breaking horses and driving cattle. The other men respected him despite his youth, for he'd proven himself reliable in the worst situations. What they didn't know was how empty he felt when night fell, when the campfires died down and the other cowboys shared tales of sweethearts waiting in town. The frontier isn't built for love, his father had told him before dying from a rustler's bullet when Mason was 16. It's built for men who can stand alone. He'd taken those words as gospel, hardening himself against connection. Better to guard your heart than to watch it get buried in the unforgiving soil of the Arizona Territory. The ranch's survival depended on keeping the valley secret. 6 cowboys guarded it in rotation, turning away lost travelers with misdirections and, when necessary, warning shots. Mason had never had to kill anyone to protect their sanctuary, but he'd always known the day might come when the choice wasn't his to make. As sunset painted the sandstone cliffs crimson, Mason spotted movement along the eastern ridge, a lone rider on a paint horse. His rifle came up instinctively as he whistled sharply, alerting the other men. But something about the rider's silhouette gave him pause. Too slight for a cowhand or rustler. The figure rode with a straight-backed grace that seemed oddly formal. As the rider drew closer, Mason's finger tensed on the trigger. Then the sunset caught long black hair flowing from beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and Mason lowered his rifle slightly. A woman? Here of all places? That's far enough, he called out. This is private property. Turn around. The rider reined to a halt about 50 yards away, then slowly removed her hat. In the fading light, Mason could see she was young, perhaps 20 years old, with striking features and dark, intelligent eyes that studied him without fear. I seek passage through the valley, she said in perfect English, though with a subtle accent he couldn't place. My people call it Whispering Waters. Mason's guard went up immediately. Nobody knew the valley had a spring except the ranch hands. Your people? And who might they be? I am Willow White-Feather, she replied, meeting his gaze directly. My father is Chief White-Feather of the Chiricahua Apache. I have returned from the Eastern School where I was sent to learn your ways. Mason kept his rifle ready, but his curiosity piqued. The Apache princess wore a simple riding skirt and white blouse that marked her as educated, yet carried herself with an unmistakable dignity that spoke of her heritage. Her jet black hair fell in a thick braid down her back, and silver earrings caught the last light of day. No passage through here, miss, Mason said firmly. Apache or not, this land belongs to the Flying J now. Her dark eyes flashed. This valley belonged to my people for generations before your ranchers claimed it. The spring was sacred to us. Before Mason could respond, shots rang out from the western ridge. Both instinctively ducked as bullets whined overhead. Rustlers, came a shout from below, trying to drive off the north herd. Mason cursed. Someone had discovered their secret valley after all. In the chaos of the moment, he made a decision that would change everything. Come with me, he told Willow, gesturing toward a narrow trail. You'll be shot if you stay here, and I can't leave you to find your own way out. To his surprise, she drew a pistol from her saddlebag. I can defend myself, cowboy, but I know a safer route if you're willing to trust me. Trust an Apache woman he'd just met, while rustlers attacked the ranch. Everything in Mason's experience screamed against it. Yet something in her steady gaze made him hesitate. Lead on, then, he finally said, against his better judgment. But any tricks and save your threats, she interrupted, wheeling her horse around. We have little time. Mason followed Willow down a nearly invisible game trail that wound between towering boulders. Behind them, more shots echoed across the valley. The trail opened onto a ledge overlooking the northern pasture, where 4 men were attempting to cut out a portion of the herd while exchanging gunfire with the ranch hands. I count 4 rustlers, Mason whispered, dropping to his belly at the ridge's edge. They must have been watching us for days to find a way in. There is always another way in, Willow said quietly. That is what your rancher fails to understand about this place. It breathes with passages that my people have known for centuries. Mason lined up a shot on the nearest rustler. Well, those passages are about to get a few unwelcome visitors sent straight to hell. Wait. Willow placed a hand on his arm, her touch startling him. There is a better way. The passage below leads to a box canyon. If your men can drive the rustlers there, they will be trapped. Mason hesitated. How do I know you're not working with them? Her dark eyes hardened. Because they are the same men who raided my father's camp last month. I recognize their leader. For a split second, Mason believed her, though it went against everything his father had taught him about trusting others, especially Indians. He whistled a pattern that the ranch hands would recognize, then signaled toward the canyon when he caught their attention. Old Pete, the ranch foreman, nodded in understanding. Within minutes, the Cowboys had maneuvered behind the rustlers, driving them exactly where Willow had indicated. Just as she'd promised, the passage narrowed into a box canyon with no exit. Throw down your weapons, Mason shouted from above, his rifle trained on the trapped men. The rustlers, realizing they were caught, reluctantly complied. As the ranch hands moved in to secure them, Mason turned to Willow with newfound respect. You saved our herd, he admitted. Why help us? Those men are enemies to all people of this land, she replied. And this valley, it deserves better than bloodshed. She paused, studying his face. You guard this place well, but you do not understand it. Something about her words unsettled him. I understand enough. It's valuable land that needs protecting. Is that all you see? She gestured toward the spring-fed meadows. Not the life it gives, not how it connects all who depend on it. Mason fell silent, unsure how to respond to the challenge in her words. It struck too close to the emptiness he carried within him, the belief that connection meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant death on the frontier. Later that night, after the rustlers had been locked in the ranch's storage cellar to await the marshal, Old Pete insisted they offer Willow hospitality for her help. Mason found her sitting alone by the bunkhouse fire, staring into the flames. The men wanted to thank you, he said awkwardly, offering her a plate of beans and biscuits. We'd have lost half the herd without your knowledge of the land. She accepted the food with a graceful nod. Your ranch owner. He believes he owns the water, yes? Mr. Jenkins owns the land, so he owns the water, Mason replied automatically, though something in her gaze made him add. But I suppose no one truly owns water. It flows where it will. Like life itself, she said softly. Your people build fences. Mine follow the water's path. Against his better judgment, Mason sat beside her. How is it you speak English so well? 7 years at Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, she answered, a shadow crossing her face. They believe they could make me forget who I am. Instead, I learned to walk in both worlds. As the fire crackled between them, Mason found himself sharing parts of his own story, his father's death, his years drifting from ranch to ranch, finally finding a place at the Flying J. Willow listened without judgment, her presence somehow both challenging and comforting. Your father taught you to stand alone, she observed. Mine taught me that no one truly does. Even when we appear most solitary, we are connected to all that surrounds us. Mason scoffed lightly. That's a fine philosophy until rustlers come for your herd or outlaws for your life. Is it not connection that saved your herd today? She countered. Your signal to your fellow cowboys? My knowledge shared with you? Even enemies are connected, though in darker ways. Her words lingered with Mason long after she retired to the small cabin they'd offered her for the night. He took the dawn patrol, riding the ridgeline as the first light touched the valley. For the first time in years, he saw it through fresh eyes, not just as property to defend, but as something alive and interconnected, as Willow had described. When he returned, Mr. Jenkins had arrived from town, eager to meet the Apache woman who had helped save his herd. To Mason's surprise, Jenkins knew of Chief White-Feather. A fair man, by all accounts, the rancher said. Keeps his warriors in check, tries to find peaceful solutions with settlers. He turned to Willow. What brings his daughter to our valley, Miss White-Feather? A journey of return, she replied. I was sent away as a child. Now I return to my people, but first I must understand what has changed in my absence. This valley was once where our tribes gathered in peace. Jenkins nodded thoughtfully. Well, you've earned safe passage and my gratitude. Perhaps we can reach an understanding about access to the spring for your people. Water's precious out here, too precious for needless conflict. Mason watched this exchange with growing confusion. The Jenkins he knew guarded the valley like a miser with gold. Yet here he was, offering compromise to an Apache princess based on nothing but a single act of assistance. Over the next week, as they waited for the marshal to collect the rustlers, Mason found himself assigned to guide Willow through the valley. Jenkins wanted detailed information about the other passages into their sanctuary, knowledge only she possessed. Each day, they rode together, her pointing out hidden trails, him noting defensive positions. Your Mr. Jenkins is wiser than you give him credit for, Willow observed on their third day, as they rested their horses by a small tributary of the main spring. He sees that sharing a portion prevents losing everything. Mason skipped a stone across the clear water. Or he's just afraid your father might claim the whole valley if he doesn't offer something first. Willow smiled, the expression transforming her serious face. Perhaps. Fear and wisdom often walk the same path initially. Is that more Apache philosophy? He asked, finding himself genuinely curious rather than defensive. Just observation, she replied. Like how you check your surroundings every few minutes, even here where it's safe. You're afraid of what might come if you truly relax your guard. The accuracy of her assessment made Mason uncomfortable. Vigilance keeps you alive out here. And alone, she added quietly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Mason felt something shift between them, a recognition that went beyond words. He quickly looked away, standing to check their horses' tethers though they needed no attention. That evening, a summer thunderstorm rolled across the valley, trapping them in a shallow cave as they returned from their scouting. Lightning illuminated the landscape in brilliant flashes, and thunder reverberated off the canyon walls. We should wait it out, Mason said, settling against the cave wall. These storms pass quickly. Willow nodded, wringing water from her long braid. My people say thunderstorms are the sky and earth speaking to each other. The lightning reaches down, and the thunder answers. Mason found himself smiling. My mother used to say God was moving furniture in heaven. You never speak of your mother, Willow observed. She died when I was young, before my father. Mason stared out at the rain. Fever took her one winter. And so you lost both your connections to this world, Willow said softly. No wonder you believe in standing alone. Something in her words broke through a wall Mason hadn't known he'd built. What choice is there? Everyone I've ever relied on has disappeared. The frontier takes everything eventually. Or perhaps it gives us what we need most, if we are willing to receive it. She held his gaze steadily. Your ranch, this valley, they gave you purpose when you needed it. But purpose is not the same as belonging. As the storm raged outside, something equally powerful stirred within Mason. This woman saw through his carefully constructed defenses with an ease that terrified and attracted him in equal measure. When the marshal finally arrived 3 days later, Mason felt an unexpected disappointment. Willow would continue her journey now that her assistance was no longer needed. He found her at dawn, preparing her paint horse for departure. Jenkins asked me to give you this, he said, handing her an official-looking document. It grants your father's people access to the Eastern Spring Branch for their herds. A gesture of gratitude and respect. Willow read the paper carefully, then folded it into her saddlebag. A beginning, perhaps. Tell him I will deliver it personally. So you're leaving today, Mason stated, trying to keep his voice neutral. My father expects me before the next full moon. She adjusted her saddle with practiced movements. I have lingered here longer than intended. Mason shifted uncomfortably. The Eastern Ridge Trail is safest this time of year. I could guide you part of the way. She turned to him, her dark eyes searching his face. Why would you leave your precious valley unguarded, Mason Jameson? The question hit closer to truth than he wanted to admit. Just being neighborly. Dangerous country for a woman alone. A slight smile curved her lips. I crossed half a continent to return home. I believe I can manage the final miles. Her expression softened. But I appreciate the concern behind your offer. Before Mason could respond, gunshots echoed from the direction of the ranch house. Both instinctively ducked, then Mason was running for his horse. Stay here, he called over his shoulder, but when he glanced back, Willow was already mounting up, her rifle in hand. They rode hard toward the commotion, arriving to find the ranch under attack, not by rustlers this time, but by a gang of outlaws who had followed the marshal, planning to free the captured rustlers and take revenge on the ranch that had captured them. The firefight was already intense, with the Cowboys pinned down behind the corral and bunkhouse. Mason slid from his horse behind a water trough, signaling for Willow to stay back. To his frustration, she simply circled wide around the battle, disappearing behind the barn. 3 outlaws had the marshal trapped in the main house, while 2 more were working their way toward the bunkhouse where the captured rustlers were still held. Mason picked off one with a clean shot, but the others took cover, making it impossible to target them without exposing himself. Suddenly, a war cry echoed across the ranch yard, a sound so primal it froze everyone for a crucial moment. Willow charged from behind the barn on her paint horse, firing with deadly accuracy. The distraction allowed the Cowboys to advance, and within minutes, the remaining outlaws were either dead or surrendering. As the gunsmoke cleared, Mason searched frantically for Willow, finally spotting her dismounting near the corral. Relief flooded through him until he saw the blood staining her blouse. "You're hit," he said, reaching her in long strides. "A graze," she replied, though her face was pale. "Nothing serious." Mason led her to the bunkhouse, where the ranch cook had basic medical supplies. As he cleaned her wound, a bullet had indeed grazed her upper arm. He found himself uncharacteristically angry. "You could have been killed," he said tersely. "This wasn't your fight, wasn't it?" Her eyes held his steadily. "These men threatened people who showed me hospitality. In my culture, that makes it very much my fight." "You were leaving anyway," he muttered, wrapping a bandage around her arm. "Could have been halfway to your father's camp by now, safe and sound." A small smile touched her lips. "Would you have preferred that, Mason? Me gone before trouble arrived?" The question struck him silent. Would he? The thought of her riding away had left him hollow inside, though he'd tried to ignore the feeling. Now, watching her brave face as he tended her wound, Mason confronted an uncomfortable truth. He'd begun to care for this woman in a way that contradicted everything he believed about surviving on the frontier. "No," he finally admitted, "though it might have been better for you." "Better is rarely found by running from what matters," she said softly. That evening, as the ranch settled back into an uneasy calm, Jenkins insisted Willow stay until her arm healed properly. Mason found himself volunteering to check on her throughout the night, concerned about fever setting in. When he brought her dinner, she was sitting up in bed, looking through an illustrated book she'd carried in her saddlebags. "Pictures of the East," she explained, showing him detailed drawings of cities and landscapes far removed from the Arizona territory. "To remind me of what I learned there, and why I chose to return here." "Was it difficult?" he asked, sitting in the chair beside her bed. "Going between such different worlds?" "At first, yes." She turned a page showing Philadelphia's busy streets. "They tried to erase everything Apache about me, my language, my beliefs, even how I wore my hair. They said it was civilization." Her expression hardened briefly. "What they meant was submission. Yet you mastered their ways," Mason observed. "Better than most, I'd wager." "I learned what was useful," she corrected. "Their writing, their medicine, their laws, tools to protect my people in changing times. But I never forgot who I was." She looked up at him. "That is the difference between adapting and surrendering, Mason. One preserves your spirit, the other extinguishes it." He considered her words carefully. "Is that why you're returning to your father's people? You didn't surrender?" "I returned because I belong there," she said simply. "But now I bring new strength. Knowledge is never wasted if it serves what you love." "What you love," Mason repeated softly, the concept foreign yet enticing. "I'm not sure I've ever let myself think in those terms." "Perhaps that is what this valley has been waiting to teach you," Willow suggested. The next day brought unexpected visitors, a small delegation from Chief White-Feather, concerned about his daughter's delayed arrival. Among them was Gray Wolf, Willow's cousin, who regarded Mason with open suspicion. "We heard gunfire yesterday," Gray Wolf said in heavily accented English. "The chief sent us to ensure Willow's safety." "Your timing is excellent," Jenkins told them, explaining the outlaw attack. "Your cousin fought bravely alongside my men. She was wounded, though not seriously." Gray Wolf's expression darkened as he turned to Mason. "You allowed her to fight your battles?" "Nobody allows Willow to do anything," Mason replied evenly. "She makes her own choices." This answer seemed to surprise the Apache warrior, who exchanged glances with his companions. After speaking with Willow in their native language, Gray Wolf announced they would camp nearby until she was well enough to travel. "My father will want to hear of these events," he told Jenkins, "and of your paper offering water rights." That night, Mason found himself unable to sleep, troubled by the knowledge that Willow would soon leave with her kinsman. The thought created an ache he hadn't expected. He walked to the spring, where moonlight danced on the rippling water. "You cannot sleep either?" Willow's voice startled him. She stood a few yards away, her arm bandaged, but her movement fluid as she approached. "Thinking," he admitted. "About what comes next. For the valley? Or for yourself?" she asked, sitting beside him on a flat rock overlooking the spring pool. "Both, I suppose." Mason picked up a small stone, turning it over in his hands. "This place won't stay secret much longer. Too many people know about it now." "Perhaps its purpose was never to remain secret," Willow suggested. "Perhaps it was waiting to be shared." Mason looked at her, moonlight silvering her features. "Like knowledge." She smiled, the expression transforming her serious face. "Exactly so. The spring gives life because it flows outward, not because it remains contained." Impulsively, Mason reached for her hand. "When do you leave with your cousin?" 3 days, if my arm continues to heal well." Her fingers remained in his, warm and steady. "My father will want to meet with Jenkins to formalize the water agreement." "And then?" Mason asked, his voice lower than he intended. Willow studied his face in the moonlight. "Then I rejoin my people, help them navigate these changing times." She paused. "What about you, Mason Jameson? Will you continue to guard your valley against all connection?" The question hit him like a physical blow. In that moment, looking into her eyes, Mason realized how thoroughly his beliefs had been shaken. The frontier wasn't just about survival. It was about finding what made survival worthwhile. "I don't know anymore," he admitted. "Everything I thought I understood seems incomplete now." "Because it was," she said simply. "We are not meant to stand alone, Mason, not even in the harshest wilderness." 3 days passed too quickly. Mason found himself inventing reasons to be near Willow, to continue their conversations that ranged from practical frontier knowledge to philosophy to tentative personal confidences. Each exchange weakened his long-held conviction that emotional distance was the only safe path on the frontier. On the morning of her departure, Jenkins called Mason to his office in the main house. The older man looked uncharacteristically thoughtful as he poured 2 cups of coffee. "I'm sending you with Miss White-Feather," he announced without preamble, "as my representative to finalize this water agreement with her father." Mason nearly choked on his coffee. "Me? Wouldn't you rather go yourself, or send Pete? He knows the ranch operations better." Jenkins fixed him with a knowing look. "This isn't about ranch operations, son. It's about building bridges. You and that young woman have started something important, not just between her and you, though I'd have to be blind not to notice that too." Mason felt his face warm. "Sir, I don't think, for once, that might be true," Jenkins interrupted with a chuckle. "You're not thinking, you're feeling. After years of watching you lock everything down tight as a drum, it's refreshing." His expression grew serious. "This valley's future depends on cooperation, not isolation. Times are changing. We either change with them or get swept away." 2 hours later, Mason rode alongside Willow and the Apache delegation, heading east toward White-Feather's camp. Gray Wolf remained coldly polite, clearly unhappy about the Cowboys' presence, but the others seemed to accept Jenkins's decision to send a representative. "Your cousin doesn't approve of me," Mason observed quietly to Willow as they rode slightly ahead of the others. "He is protective," she replied, "and he does not understand why I speak so freely with you." "And why do you?" Mason asked, suddenly needing to hear her answer. She considered before responding. Because you listen, not just to my words, but to what lies beneath them. Few white men have ever truly listened to me. I wasn't very good at listening when we first met, Mason admitted. No, she agreed with a small smile. But you learned. That is rarer than you might think. The journey to Chief White-Feather's camp took 2 days. As they traveled, Willow pointed out plants and landmarks significant to her people, sharing stories passed down through generations. Mason found himself entranced not just by the tales, but by the way her whole being seemed to come alive in telling them. This was Apache land long before it was Arizona territory, she explained as they crossed a dry riverbed. Not owned, but known. Every spring, every canyon, every place game could be found or medicines gathered. And now? Mason asked, genuinely curious. Now we adapt or perish, she said simply. My father understands this. It is why he sent me to learn your ways, why he negotiates rather than fights. But adaptation is not surrender. We keep what matters most, our understanding of this land, our connection to it and each other. Chief White-Feather's camp was larger than Mason had expected, with dozens of wickiups arranged in a traditional circle and horses grazing in nearby meadows. Children played while women worked on hides or cooked over small fires. Men repaired weapons or tended the horse herd. All activity paused when their party rode in. The chief himself stood waiting, a tall, imposing figure whose dignity needed no adornment beyond the simple headband he wore. His eyes, so like his daughter's, missed nothing as he welcomed Willow home with a brief embrace before turning his attention to Mason. So Jenkins sends a young man to speak of water rights, he said in perfect English, surprising Mason. Are you his son? No, sir, Mason replied respectfully. Just a cowhand who's been with the Flying J for 3 years. And yet he trusts you with matters of importance. The chief gestured toward his own lodge. Come, we will speak together. Inside, seated on woven mats around a small fire, Mason presented Jenkins's formal water-sharing agreement. The chief read it carefully, while Willow translated certain points into Apache for the tribal elders who had joined them. This is a beginning, White-Feather finally said. But there are questions of access, of cattle crossing points, of what happens in drought years. What Mason had expected to be a simple exchange of documents turned into hours of detailed negotiation. Through it all, he was struck by the chief's thorough understanding of both Apache needs and ranching realities. Occasionally Willow would interject, clarifying points for both sides with impressive precision. By nightfall, they had reached a more comprehensive agreement than Jenkins had initially proposed, one that Mason believed would better serve both communities in the long run. As they shared a meal afterward, White-Feather studied Mason with open curiosity. My daughter speaks well of you, Mason Jameson. She says you see the valley as more than just land to be owned. Mason glanced at Willow, who was deep in conversation with women from the camp. I'm learning to, he admitted. Your daughter has been a good teacher. She walks in 2 worlds, the chief said. A difficult path, but one that may build bridges others can follow. His gaze remained steady. What will you do when you return to your valley? The question caught Mason off guard. Sir, you have seen another way of living, of understanding the land. Will you return unchanged? Or will you carry something new back with you? Mason considered carefully before answering. I can't go back unchanged, he finally said. Not after. He hesitated, then continued honestly. Not after meeting Willow. She's shown me what I've been missing by standing apart from others. White-Feather nodded slowly. Then perhaps Jenkins was wiser than I thought, sending you here. The celebration that night included traditional Apache dances and songs. Mason watched, entranced, as Willow participated in a women's dance, her movements graceful and assured. She seemed completely at home, yet when their eyes met across the firelight, he sensed she was sharing the experience with him rather than excluding him from it. Later, as the gathering quieted, she found him sitting apart from the others, looking up at stars that seemed impossibly bright away from the ranch's lamps. What are you thinking? She asked, settling beside him. That I've been guarding the wrong things, he replied honestly. Watching boundaries instead of building connections. She was silent for a moment. And now? Mason turned to her, finding courage in the darkness. Now I'm wondering if there's a place for me in this new understanding. If there's a way forward that doesn't mean being alone. There are many paths, she said softly. Some run parallel for a time, then diverge. Others join permanently. Which are ours, Willow? He asked, his heart pounding. Before she could answer, shouts erupted from the far side of the camp. Riders approached, white men, moving fast. Rangers, someone called out in Apache, the alarm spreading quickly. Mason and Willow ran toward the commotion. A small unit of Arizona Rangers had arrived, led by a hard-faced captain Mason recognized from visits to the nearest town. We're tracking outlaws, the captain announced. 3 men broke free from a prison transport. Trail leads this direction. Chief White-Feather stepped forward. No outlaws have passed through our camp, Captain Richards. You and your men are welcome to rest here, but there are no fugitives among us. The captain's eyes narrowed. We'll need to search your camp to verify that, Chief. Tension crackled in the air. Mason saw hands move toward weapons on both sides, a confrontation brewing that could end in bloodshed. Without thinking, he stepped between them. Captain Richards, he said clearly. I'm Mason Jameson, from the Flying J Ranch. I've been here negotiating water rights with Chief White-Feather at Mr. Jenkins's request. There are no outlaws here. I'd stake my reputation on it. Richards' surprise at finding a white cowboy vouching for the Apache was evident. Jameson? I know Jenkins. Good man. He hesitated. You're certain? Absolutely, Mason confirmed. And Chief White-Feather's people helped us capture the Ross gang just last week when they attacked our ranch. Ask Marshal Benton if you doubt me. The tension eased slightly, but Richards still looked suspicious. Then you won't mind if we rest here tonight and pick up the trail at first light. What might have escalated into violence instead became an uneasy coexistence, with the Rangers making camp at the edge of the Apache circle. Mason found himself acting as an intermediary, his presence a buffer between two worlds. Near midnight, as he finally sought his own bedroll, Willow appeared beside him. You prevented bloodshed tonight, she said quietly. Standing between worlds as few can. Mason shrugged uncomfortably. Just seemed like the right thing to do. It was. And it showed me something important. Her eyes held his in the darkness. That perhaps our paths need not diverge after all. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted near the Rangers' camp. 3 men had indeed arrived, not hiding among the Apache, but attempting to steal horses from the Rangers' remuda. The fugitives had been tracking the lawmen, planning to ambush them and take their supplies. The firefight was brief but fierce. When it ended, 2 outlaws lay dead and the 3rd was captured. 1 ranger was wounded, and to everyone's surprise, Chief White-Feather offered the services of the tribe's medicine man to treat him. As dawn broke, Captain Richards approached the chief with newfound respect. It seems we misjudged the situation, Chief White-Feather. I appreciate your assistance with my wounded man. We are all people of this land, the chief replied simply. It serves no one when blood is shed needlessly. Mason watched this exchange with a growing sense that he was witnessing something profound, a small moment of understanding between cultures that typically regarded each other with suspicion or hostility. As the Rangers prepared to leave with their prisoner, Richards approached Mason. Jenkins is lucky to have a man like you representing him. Not many cowboys would stand between Rangers and Apache. Maybe more should, Mason replied. Might be fewer misunderstandings that way. After the Rangers departed, Chief White-Feather called Mason to his lodge. To his surprise, Willow was already there, seated beside her father with an expression Mason couldn't quite read. You have proven yourself a man of honor, the chief began. One who sees beyond the usual boundaries between our peoples. Mason shifted uncomfortably under his scrutiny. I just did what seemed right, sir. Which is precisely why I wish to propose something unusual. White-Feather glanced at his daughter. Willow tells me you understand the importance of the valley's water, not just as a resource, but as a connection between all who depend on it. Mason nodded, unsure where this was leading. I would like to establish a permanent liaison between our people and the ranchers who now share this land, the chief continued. Someone who can mediate disputes before they begin, who understands both ways of thinking. He paused significantly. Someone like you. The proposal took Mason completely by surprise. Me? But I'm just a cowhand. I don't have any authority to. I have already dispatched a messenger to Jenkins, White-Feather interrupted, suggesting that you be given authority to represent the ranch in all matters concerning our shared interests. His expression remained serious. But there is another matter to discuss. Mason's heart began to pound as the chief continued. My daughter must decide where her path leads now. She has fulfilled my wish that she learn the white man's ways. But I see that her journey has brought her to an unexpected crossroads. White-Feather turned to Willow. You have feelings for this man. It wasn't a question, and Willow didn't treat it as one. Yes, father. I do. Mason felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. He had suspected, hoped, but hearing her acknowledge it so directly made his chest tighten with emotion. And you, Mason Jameson? The chief asked, his gaze penetrating. What are your feelings toward my daughter? Mason looked at Willow, seeing in her face everything he'd been missing: connection, understanding, the possibility of a life not defined by isolation. In that moment, his father's lessons about standing alone seemed not just wrong but empty. I love her, he said simply, the words feeling right as soon as they left his lips. I didn't expect to. I didn't want to. But I do. White-Feather nodded slowly. Then we must find a path forward that honors both worlds. For I will not ask my daughter to choose between her people and her heart. 2 weeks later, Mason rode back into the Hidden Mesa Valley alongside Willow. Behind them came a small group of Apache families and Jenkins himself, who had traveled to meet with Chief White-Feather after receiving his message. The agreement they had reached was unprecedented in the territory, a formal partnership between the ranch and the tribe, with shared access to the valley's precious water and joint protection of its resources. Mason had indeed been appointed as liaison, with Jenkins creating a new position that came with both authority and responsibility. Never thought I'd live to see Apache families camping peacefully on Flying J land, Old Pete commented as they established the first shared settlement near the eastern Spring Branch. Times change, Jenkins replied, and those who don't change with them get left behind. He clapped Mason on the shoulder. This young man saw what the rest of us missed, that we're stronger together than apart. As twilight settled over the valley, Mason found Willow standing on the ridge where they had first met, her slender form silhouetted against the darkening sky. Having second thoughts? He asked, joining her. She turned to him with a smile that still made his heart race. No, but I am thinking of how much has changed since I rode into your rifle's sight. Mason laughed softly. I was so certain of everything then. So wrong about what mattered. Not wrong, she corrected. Just incomplete. Like the valley itself. Beautiful but isolated, protected but hidden away from those who might share in its gifts. He took her hand, marveling at how natural it felt now. Your father has given us his blessing, but he said we must decide the form our union takes. Apache tradition or white man's ceremony? Both, Willow said decisively. We will be married by both the tribal elder and the minister from town. Our life will honor both worlds, excluding neither. Mason nodded, drawing her close. And where will we live? She gestured toward the valley below, where the lights of the ranch house twinkled alongside the new Apache encampment. Here, in this place where waters meet. We will build something new, Mason, not just for ourselves, but for all who come after us. As the stars emerged above them, Mason Jameson realized how completely his understanding of the frontier had transformed. It wasn't a place where men stood alone against hostile forces. It was where different worlds could meet, where connection wasn't weakness but strength, where love could flourish even in harsh landscapes. The following spring, Mason and Willow were married beneath the cottonwood trees near the valley's main spring. Chief White-Feather and Mr. Jenkins stood side by side as witnesses, their own unlikely friendship a testament to the changes one brave Apache princess and one open-hearted cowboy had set in motion. Their union blessed by both cultures, Mason and Willow built a home that straddled two worlds, a sturdy cabin furnished with both Apache crafts and Western comforts. Under their guidance, the secret valley became not a jealously guarded resource, but a model of cooperation, drawing visitors from across the territory curious about how such an arrangement could succeed. 5 years later, Mason stood on the same ridge where he had once stood guard, watching their 3-year-old son playing by the spring below, surrounded by children from both communities. Willow joined him, their infant daughter cradled in her arms. Remember when you believed the frontier was no place for love? She asked, leaning against his shoulder. Mason smiled, wrapping his arm around his family. I remember believing many things that turned out to be wrong. He looked out over the thriving valley, no longer secret, but more precious than ever. Thank you for showing me a better way. We found it together, she corrected gently. Just as we will find all paths that matter. Below them, Apache families and ranch hands gathered for the evening meal, sharing food and stories as naturally as they now shared the valley's water. Mason Jameson, once determined to stand alone, found himself at the center of a community built on the very connections he had once feared, and discovered in that belonging the true strength of the frontier spirit.